obsessed with Legos. Not so much like his two older brothers who will meticulously work through the instruction manual to make sure it's built exactly as the instructions say. No, Jay builds it all in his mind. He's a master builder. He knows exactly which piece goes with which thing in his mind he's trying to build. And what Jay discovered, and what he's teaching me, is the beautiful art of rebuilding. You see, Jay has a younger brother, Huck, and Huck's sole purpose in life is to destroy everything. And so Jay is learning that the moment of absolute terror when my ship is being destroyed by Huck can be replaced by this intense excitement to rebuild. And obviously he finds out that every time the third and fourth iteration is always better than the first. My wife and I were born in Oregon, so we didn't really know what it was like to be inundated and grow up in a conservative climate. So when we moved in 2007, actually here to Arizona, we were in for quite a surprise when we joined a rather conservative church as their worship pastor. It didn't take us long to discover that the trajectory of our theological journey was moving in a different direction than the church that we came to join was rather rooted. And it seems that the distance was growing greater with every Brian McLaren book or Richard Beck blog that I read. In September of 2011, President Obama signed a repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That night on my Facebook, I posted an article announcing that, and I said, glad this day finally came. A little naive to the storm that would be unleashed on this morning. 2 days later, an emergency board meeting was called, and I was brought in to give an account of my theology of sexuality. And so there I sat with 8 men forced to give an answer for something that I honestly hadn't even told many of my friends or family at that point. I chose to speak from a place of conviction and authenticity and integrity and say things like, guys, I'm no longer convinced that the Bible condemns those who are born same-sex attraction. I'm no longer convinced that being gay excludes someone from being a part of God's people. I came out of the theological hospital world, and 3 days later I was fired. This job for 5 years. 6 months after that, Providence connected me to this church in San Diego where I found new life, and I found a resonance with this peculiar expression of Christianity that I knew I was called to, yet didn't know if it existed. And I found this church that was progressively bent, and yet the bent still leaned toward Jesus. And so for 18 months, myself and my wife, and now 4 boys, at this time, we were experiencing new life in America's finest city, meeting some of America's finest people. And my Lego ship was being rebuilt with far more nuance and beauty and color. Unfortunately, the dream shattered a little quickly as soon as I discovered some differences between the church's attitude and belief and mine own, particularly related to maybe what it meant to be a pastor, or what the call was to be a shepherd, or what it looked like to lead the least and the last and the lost. And this paradigm of compatibility put me once again on the outside. So much so that for the second time in 2 years, I was brought into a room full of elders and said, you're no longer wanted here as a pastor. Discovering for the first time there is a spiritual gift of being fired. So with these pieces of what had just been this newly built Lego ship now filling my uncertain hands, I wondered, is this a sign that I just missed my calling? Was I not meant to be a pastor? Or maybe the sign itself was the call. And so out of the wreckage of these 2 devastating experiences, my wife and I turned to each other and we discovered maybe now is the time where we step into that dream we've been having for 5 years, where we start church together. And so in March of last year, a group of about 15 of us started what we would eventually call Sojourn Grace Collective, a church that we call uniquely Christian, but not exclusively, a church where those who were previously wounded by church, can get an amen, can find healing. Can I get an amen? Feel free to respond. I'll even take out 10 seconds. It's a church mixed with race, creed, orientation, age, family, life stage. It's a church equally led by men and women, gay and straight, where we value things like shared leadership, expressing our fears and doubts, where we value walking with people through the mess that is life. At Sojourner, we do our best to chase after the ways of Jesus, to orient ourselves around God's kingdom, and to learn to love and respect ourselves and as healthy as we can as sons and daughters of the King. For 3 months we met in our house. Soon we outgrew the living room, and now we meet at this great school. We're about 70 to 80 adults and about 20 to 30 kids. Every Sunday morning gather together to chase after this vision of progressive Christianity. Do you remember that story in the Gospels of that black man whose life was a perpetual begging, put him on the side of the road, and fortune one day brought Jesus by, and he cried out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And yet, Jesus' followers thought this man was unfit for an audience with the king. Remember this story? So he said, hush, man, Jesus doesn't have time for you. But do you remember what Jesus did? Jesus didn't heal the man from afar, although he could have, I'm sure. He didn't go to the man and break through the wall that his disciples had built, the disciples who restricted access to this man to Jesus. No, he turned to the very people who had just built the wall, who had just restricted access to the blind man. And he said, you will bring him to me. Here's the thing. I believe God is right now inviting those of us who have either perhaps built walls or stood by while walls have been built, walls that have restricted people access to Jesus. I wonder if there's this divine calling to go break those walls down, to find the people and to bring them to Jesus. And I just think that's why we started Southern Grace Collective. Even though it hasn't even been a full year yet, I can already assure you that this new Lego ship that is my life is the most beautiful version yet. And I'm learning maybe there's something to this rebuilding thing, also known as resurrection,